founding in Sicily, 19th century. The Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, traces its origins to the rural landscapes of Sicily in the early 19th century. During this period, Sicily was characterized by a tumultuous socio-political environment. The island had been subjected to a series of foreign rulers, including the Spanish, French, and eventually the Bourbons of Naples. These foreign regimes often exploited Sicily's resources, leaving the local population impoverished and oppressed. In response to the lack of effective governance and widespread corruption, local landowners and influential figures began to form secret societies to protect their interests. These groups offered protection services, known as piso, to the local populace and sought to administer their own form of justice in the absence of reliable law enforcement. Over time, these protection rackets evolved into a structured organization that we now recognize as the Mafia. The term mafia itself is believed to have originated from the Sicilian word mafioso, which means bold or daring, reflecting the organization's initial role as a protector of the local people. Expansion and consolidation, late 19th century. As Italy moved towards unification in the mid-19th century, the Mafia seized the opportunity to expand and consolidate its power. The unification of Italy, completed in 1861, brought about significant social and economic changes, but it also left a power vacuum in many parts of Sicily. The new Italian government struggled to establish control over the island, providing an opening for the Mafia to assert its influence. During this period, the Mafia infiltrated local government institutions, using bribery and intimidation to place their own members or sympathetic individuals in key positions. This allowed them to control public contracts, influence judicial decisions, and protect their criminal enterprises from law enforcement. The Mafia also extended its control over Sicily's lucrative citrus industry. The island's fertile soil and favorable climate made it an ideal location for growing citrus fruits, which were in high demand in Europe and North America. The Mafia monopolized the citrus trade by controlling the distribution networks and using violence to eliminate competition. Migration to the United States, early 20th century. The turn of the 20th century saw a significant wave of Italian immigrants moving to the United States, driven by economic hardship and political instability in Italy. Among these immigrants were members of the Mafia, who saw new opportunities in the burgeoning American cities. They established themselves in neighborhoods with large Italian populations, such as New York City's Little Italy and Chicago's Near West Side. In the United States, the Mafia quickly adapted to the new environment, forming powerful families that controlled various illegal activities. These included gambling, extortion, and loan sharking. The American Mafia, also known as La Cosa Nostra, developed its own distinct structure and traditions while maintaining ties to the Sicilian Mafia. The presence of the Mafia in America was marked by the formation of families, each led by a boss, and the establishment of a code of silence known as omerta, which prohibited members from cooperating with law enforcement. Prohibition Era, 1920 to 1933. The enactment of Prohibition in the United States in 1920, which banned the production, sale, and distribution of alcoholic beverages, provided an unprecedented opportunity for the Mafia to expand its operations. The demand for illegal alcohol skyrocketed, and the Mafia was quick to capitalize on this lucrative market. They established extensive bootlegging operations, smuggling alcohol from Canada and the Caribbean into the United States. During this period, the Mafia's power and wealth grew exponentially. Notorious figures such as Al Capone in Chicago became synonymous with organized crime. Capone's empire was built on a vast network of speakeasies, illegal breweries, and smuggling routes. He used violence and intimidation to maintain control over his territory, engaging in bloody turf wars with rival gangs. The Prohibition era also saw the rise of other prominent Mafia leaders, including Charles "Lucky" Luciano in New York, who would later play a crucial role in reorganizing the American Mafia. The Castellamarese War, 1930 to 1931. The early 1930s witnessed a major power struggle within the American Mafia known as the Castellammarese War. This conflict erupted between two rival factions in New York, one led by Joe, the boss, Masuria, and the other by Salvatore Maranzano. The war was fueled by competition over control of lucrative criminal enterprises and personal rivalries. The conflict culminated in a series of violent confrontations, resulting in numerous deaths on both sides. The turning point came when Charles "Lucky" Luciano, a prominent figure in Masuria's faction, switched allegiances and orchestrated the assassination of both Masuria and Maranzano. With the elimination of the old guard, Luciano emerged as the new leader of the American Mafia. In the aftermath of the Castellammarese War, Luciano implemented significant changes to the structure of the Mafia. He established the Commission, a governing body composed of the heads of the most powerful Mafia families in the United States. The Commission was designed to mediate disputes, coordinate activities, and maintain order within the organization. This marked the beginning of a more organized and cohesive national crime syndicate. Establishment of the Commission, 1931. Following the bloody Castellammarese War, the establishment of the Commission by Charles "Lucky" Luciano in 1931 was a pivotal moment in the history of the American Mafia. The Commission was composed of the heads of the five families of New York, the Bonanno, Colombo, Gambino, Genovese, and Lucchese families, as well as representatives from other major Mafia families across the country. The creation of the Commission transformed the Mafia from a collection of rival factions into a more unified and structured organization. The Commission served as a governing body that regulated the activities of the Mafia, resolved disputes, and enforced rules. It also coordinated national and international criminal enterprises, including drug trafficking, gambling, and loan sharking. The establishment of the Commission marked the beginning of the Mafia's golden age, as it expanded its influence and operations across the United States and beyond. The Mafia and World War II. During World War II, the Mafia's relationship with the United States government took an unexpected turn. In an effort to secure the New York waterfront and prevent sabotage by Axis powers, the U.S. Navy turned to organized crime for assistance. Operation Underworld involved collaboration between the Navy and Mafia figures, most notably Charles "Lucky" Luciano. Luciano, who was serving a lengthy prison sentence at the time, was approached by the Navy for help. In exchange for his cooperation, Luciano was promised a reduction in his sentence. He used his influence to ensure that the docks remained secure and that labor disputes were minimized. Additionally, the Mafia provided intelligence that proved valuable in the Allied invasion of Sicily in 1943. This wartime cooperation highlighted the Mafia's extensive reach and influence, as well as its ability to operate in both the criminal underworld and legitimate spheres. While the extent of the Mafia's contribution to the war effort remains a subject of debate, the collaboration demonstrated the organization's ability to adapt and thrive in different circumstances. Post-war expansion and influence, 1940s to 1950s. The post-war period saw the Mafia expand its influence into legitimate businesses, labor unions, and politics. The economic boom of the 1940s and 1950s provided new opportunities for organized crime to infiltrate key industries. The Mafia leveraged its control over labor unions to extort businesses, influence construction projects, and secure lucrative contracts. One of the most notable figures during this period was Frank Costello, known as the Prime Minister of the Underworld. Costello wielded significant power by bridging the gap between the criminal world and legitimate enterprises. He established connections with influential politicians, businessmen, and entertainers, using these relationships to protect and expand his criminal operations. The Mafia's involvement in labor unions, particularly the Teamsters, allowed them to exert control over industries such as trucking, construction, and waste management. They used their influence to engage in bid rigging, extortion, and other illegal activities. The Mafia's infiltration of legitimate businesses provided a veneer of respectability while generating substantial profits. Appalachian Meeting, 1957. A major turning point in the public's awareness of the Mafia came with the Appalachian Meeting in 1957. On November 14, law enforcement raided a summit of Mafia leaders at the home of Joseph Barbara in Appalachian, New York. The meeting was attended by approximately 100 Mafia members from across the United States and Canada, including some of the most powerful figures in organized crime. The raid resulted in numerous arrests and exposed the existence of a national crime syndicate to the public. Until then, many in law enforcement and the media had been skeptical about the extent and organization of the Mafia's activities. The Appalachian Meeting provided concrete evidence of the Mafia's national reach and its highly organized structure. The fallout from the Appalachian Meeting led to increased scrutiny and crackdowns on Mafia activities by law enforcement agencies. It also prompted congressional investigations into organized crime, culminating in the creation of the McClellan Committee, which investigated labor racketeering and the Mafia's influence over labor unions and businesses. The Vachi hearings, 1963. In 1963, Joseph Vachi, a member of the Genovese crime family, became the first Mafia member to publicly acknowledge the existence of the Mafia and provide detailed information about its operations. Valachi's testimony before the U.S. Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations, chaired by Senator John L. McClellan, revealed the inner workings of the Mafia and provided invaluable insights to law enforcement. Valachi's testimony was a watershed moment in the fight against organized crime. He described the structure of the Mafia, its initiation rituals, and the code of silence known as omerta. He also identified key Mafia leaders and explained how the organization operated on a national scale. Valachi's revelations helped to demystify the Mafia and provided a roadmap for law enforcement agencies to pursue further investigations and prosecutions. The Vachi hearings marked a shift towards more aggressive prosecution and investigation of organized crime. They led to increased federal resources being allocated to combat the Mafia and laid the groundwork for future legislative and law enforcement efforts to dismantle organized crime syndicates. RICO Act, 1970. The passage of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, RICO, Act in 1970 was a significant milestone in the fight against the Mafia. The RICO Act provided prosecutors with powerful tools to target the Mafia's entire operation rather than just individual members. It allowed for the prosecution of anyone involved in a criminal enterprise, even if they had not directly committed a crime, as long as they had participated in the organization's activities. The RICO Act was instrumental in dismantling the Mafia's hierarchical structure by enabling prosecutors to indict and convict high-ranking leaders who had previously been insulated from direct criminal activities. It also allowed for the seizure of assets acquired through criminal activities, weakening the financial power of organized crime syndicates. The RICO Act led to numerous high-profile convictions and significantly weakened the Mafia's power. Prominent cases included the conviction of bosses from New York's 5 families, as well as other Mafia leaders across the country. The Act's broad scope and severe penalties made it one of the most effective tools in the arsenal of law enforcement agencies combating organized crime. The Pizza Connection, 1980s. The Pizza Connection case of the 1980s was a massive drug trafficking operation that highlighted the global reach of the Mafia. Sicilian Mafia families, in collaboration with their American counterparts, smuggled heroin into the United States through a network of pizzerias and other legitimate businesses. The operation generated millions of dollars in profits and underscored the Mafia's involvement in the international drug trade. The investigation into the Pizza Connection was one of the most complex and far-reaching efforts undertaken by law enforcement. It involved coordinated efforts between U.S. and Italian authorities, as well as extensive surveillance, wiretaps, and undercover operations. The case culminated in the indictment of over 30 individuals and the seizure of significant quantities of heroin and drug money. The Pizza Connection case was a major blow to the Mafia, resulting in numerous convictions and long prison sentences for key figures involved in the operation. It also demonstrated the effectiveness of international cooperation in combating organized crime and highlighted the Mafia's adaptability in exploiting new criminal opportunities. The Commission Trial, 1985 to 1986. One of the most significant legal actions against the Mafia was the Commission Trial, which took place from 1985 to 1986. Prosecutors used the RICO Act to target the leadership of New York's 5 families, charging them with a wide range of crimes including murder, extortion, and labor racketeering. The trial was part of a broader effort to dismantle the Mafia's power structure by targeting its governing body, the Commission. The Commission trial resulted in the conviction of several high-ranking Mafia leaders, including Anthony "Fat Tony" Salerno of the Genovese family, Carmine Jr. Persico of the Colombo family, and Anthony "Tony Dux" Corallo of the Lucchese family. The convictions dealt a severe blow to the Mafia's leadership and significantly weakened its control over organized crime activities in New York. The success of the Commission trial marked a major victory for law enforcement and demonstrated the effectiveness of the RICO Act in targeting organized crime. It also underscored the importance of sustained and coordinated efforts by federal agencies to dismantle the Mafia's power structure. Downfall of John Gotti, 1992. John Gotti, the flamboyant and charismatic boss of the Gambino crime family, was one of the most high-profile figures in the American Mafia during the 1980s and early 1990s. Known as the Teflon Don for his ability to evade conviction, Gotti became a media sensation due to his lavish lifestyle and brazen defiance of law enforcement. Gotti's downfall came in 1992 when he was convicted on charges of murder, racketeering, and other crimes. The key to his conviction was the testimony of his underboss, Salvatore "Sammy the Bull" Gravano, who became a government witness and provided detailed information about the Gambino family's operations. Gravano's cooperation was a significant breakthrough for prosecutors and marked a turning point in the fight against the Mafia. Gotti's conviction and subsequent life sentence symbolized a new era of successful prosecutions against high-ranking Mafia members. It demonstrated the effectiveness of leveraging insider testimony and the importance of protecting witnesses who chose to cooperate with law enforcement. Operation Clean Hands, 1992. In Italy, Operation Clean Hands, Mani Pulite, in the early 1990s was a sweeping anti-corruption campaign that targeted corruption at all levels of government and business. The operation was initiated by Italian magistrates and prosecutors who sought to expose and dismantle the pervasive influence of the Mafia in political and economic affairs. Operation Clean Hands revealed extensive Mafia involvement in public contracts, political bribery, and money laundering. The investigation led to the arrest and conviction of numerous politicians, businessmen, and Mafia members. It also exposed the deep-rooted connections between organized crime and the Italian political system, leading to widespread public outrage and calls for reform. The impact of Operation Clean Hands was profound, significantly disrupting the Sicilian Mafia's operations and weakening its influence over Italian society. It also marked a shift towards more aggressive and transparent efforts to combat organized crime and corruption in Italy. Assassination of AntiMafia judges, 1992. The assassination of AntiMafia judges Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino in 1992 was a tragic and pivotal moment in Italy's fight against organized crime. Both judges were prominent figures in the anti-mafia movement and had played key roles in prosecuting mafia leaders and exposing the organization's activities. Falcone and Borsellino were targeted by the Mafia in retaliation for their efforts to dismantle the organization. Falcone was killed in a massive bomb attack on the highway near Capaci, Sicily, while Borsellino was assassinated in a car bombing in Palermo just 2 months later. Their deaths sparked widespread public outrage and galvanized the Italian government's commitment to combating the Mafia. In the aftermath of the assassinations, the Italian government implemented stricter measures to protect those fighting organized crime and increased efforts to dismantle Mafia networks. The deaths of Falcone and Borsellino became a symbol of the sacrifices made by those dedicated to eradicating the Mafia and served as a rallying cry for continued anti-Mafia efforts. The decline of traditional Mafia activities, late 20th century. By the late 20th century, traditional Mafia activities such as extortion, racketeering, and labor racketeering began to decline due to aggressive law enforcement efforts and changes in the economy. The Mafia faced increased scrutiny from federal and state agencies, as well as new legal tools such as the RICO Act that made it easier to prosecute organized crime. The decline of traditional activities forced the Mafia to adapt and diversify its operations. While some families continued to engage in extortion and loan sharking, others shifted their focus to new areas such as drug trafficking, money laundering, and cybercrime. The Mafia also sought to maintain a lower profile, avoiding the high-profile violence and public attention that had characterized earlier decades. The decline of traditional activities did not signal the end of the Mafia, but rather a transformation in its methods and operations. The organization continued to evolve, finding new ways to generate revenue and maintain its influence in the face of changing circumstances. Emergence of new criminal enterprises, 21st century. In the 21st century, the Mafia faced competition from new criminal organizations, including Russian and Albanian mafias, as well as Mexican drug cartels. These groups often collaborated with or competed against traditional Mafia families, leading to a more complex and dynamic criminal landscape. The emergence of new criminal enterprises presented both challenges and opportunities for the Mafia. On one hand, increased competition made it more difficult for the Mafia to dominate certain illegal markets. On the other hand, the globalization of crime opened new avenues for collaboration and profit. The Mafia established alliances with other criminal organizations to facilitate drug trafficking, human trafficking, and other transnational crimes. The evolving criminal landscape required the Mafia to adapt its strategies and operations. While maintaining its traditional hierarchical structure, the organization also became more flexible and networked, leveraging its extensive connections to navigate the changing environment. Globalization and the Mafia, 21st century. Globalization has had a profound impact on the Mafia, both challenging and benefiting the organization. Increased international cooperation among law enforcement agencies has made it more difficult for the Mafia to operate with impunity. Joint operations and information sharing have led to significant arrests and disruptions of Mafia activities. However, globalization has also provided new opportunities for the Mafia to expand its operations. The organization has diversified into international drug trafficking, human trafficking, and financial crimes, exploiting the interconnectedness of the global economy. The Mafia has used advanced technology and sophisticated financial networks to launder money and conceal its activities. The Mafia's ability to adapt to globalization has allowed it to remain a powerful and resilient criminal organization. While facing increased pressure from law enforcement, the Mafia continues to exploit new opportunities and maintain its influence in the criminal underworld. Modern anti-Mafia efforts and reforms, 2020s. In recent years, governments and law enforcement agencies have continued to intensify their efforts to combat the Mafia. Modern anti-Mafia strategies include advanced surveillance techniques, financial tracking, and the use of technology to disrupt criminal networks. International cooperation has also been strengthened, with joint operations targeting transnational crime and money laundering. Reforms aimed at reducing the Mafia's influence include measures to protect witnesses, increase transparency in public contracts, and dismantle corrupt networks within institutions. Public awareness campaigns and education initiatives have also been launched to encourage communities to resist Mafia intimidation and extortion. Despite these efforts, the Mafia remains a formidable adversary, capable of adapting to new challenges and exploiting weaknesses in the system. The ongoing fight against the Mafia requires vigilance, innovation, and sustained commitment from law enforcement, governments, and society as a whole.